It may or may not be obvious at this point, but I really like video games. I like a lot of different types of video games. Maybe not all of them are the most diverse, but I like to try out all sorts of games to see what will take my fancy and, hey, maybe it will become something special to me. As well as video games, I also like making lists. It could be tier lists, roster lists, to-do lists, frankly, any kind of list. So what happens when I try to combine these two loves of mine? Most people would make a top 10 list of their favourite games of all time, but for me that doesn't work. I find that often I'll accidentally end up engineering it so that all of my favourite franchises get a game in that list, rather than being a natural judgment of my favourite games. If 2 Mario Kart games were hypothetically in that top 10 list, I'd deliberately leave one out so that my favourite, say, Pokemon game would be able to be on there. It makes sense, right? That way there's no pressure for me to represent all of my favourite franchises because, well, they'll all get on there naturally. And once I've made my top 100 list, all ordered of course, I can naturally see what my top 10 is, or my top 20, or my top 50, and so on. It's a lot of fun to keep, maintain and update, and I genuinely would recommend it to anyone who also likes video games and lists. Recently I realised that the section of my list that I would say is full of games I truly love, as opposed to just really like, is getting very close to that 100 mark, and so I decided that now was the time for me to finally share it in a video. But me talking for 5 minutes about every game would take a long time, so my challenge to myself was simple: try to summarise every single game in a single sentence. So, without further ado, let's look at my top 100 favourite games of all time as of 2023. Number 100, Bound. Story-based games are my weakness, as you'll see through this list, and this is a game with a lot of weird stuff in it, not all of it at first seeming to come together, but eventually you start to piece it all together and it tells a really meaningful story that has always stuck with me. Number 99, That's You. This is not only a nice party game to play with friends and family, but its general vibe feels very nostalgic of past decades in a way that somehow feels like it takes off the rose-tinted goggles, which feels kind of weird for me to be saying as I was born over 2 decades too late to remember that. Number 98, The Case of the Golden Idol. Very unique feeling game which had me hooked for the entire thing, rarely feeling frustrating but always remaining interesting, and having a very intriguing setting and plot with lots of twists as the game progresses along. Number 97, Shrek 2 for the GBA. Yes, I am unironically putting a version of Shrek 2 on this list, and this version has really fun, solid puzzle platform gameplay where you use different characters and their abilities to progress, and that proves that it deserves a space on this list. Number 96, Boomerang Fu. I love playing local multiplayer games with my family, and while I found this to be a difficult game to get used to at first, once I was, there's an excellent multiplayer game here that can be played for hours at a time and not get boring, as well as cool, quirky food-based characters, my personal favourite being the sushi. Number 95, Among Us. As much as this game gets memed, it does have a genuinely gripping premise and is great to play with a group of friends, and during lockdown I would often call my friends and play it with them while on the phone, so it was genuinely invaluable in that time. Number 94, Shadow of the Colossus. Games can often use giant-sized enemies in cheap or undynamic ways, but Shadow of the Colossus captures that feeling of actually bringing down an enormous, lumbering creature perfectly, and it makes for a game that somehow feels as harrowing as it is epic. Number 93, Part-Time UFO. Part-Time UFO is the epitome of taking a concept and finding unique ways to apply it, and while some levels could get frustrating and there was some repetition of certain tasks, it definitely never got boring, and it's just a really cute, enjoyable game. Number 92, Pokemon Violet. It wasn't a perfect series introduction to open world, but it had me hooked straight away with a world I wanted to see more of, and the new Pokemon that they introduced this generation were awesome, especially for me, Palafin and Mousehold. Number 91, Good Job. A game I had my eye on from its very first announcement. This was such a great little game, thanks to the fact that it understands that when you're given a forklift or a wire to slingshot things with, breaking down walls is always the most fun way to use them. Number 90, Venba. There actually isn't a massive amount of the cooking based gameplay in this game, but a game like this is played for the story and the vibes, and the story here is a very heartfelt one that honestly got me emotional, even as someone who isn't a part of Indian culture. Number 89, Super Stardust Ultra VR. I don't even really know much about regular Super Stardust Ultra because the bit that I always go back to is the first person shooter mode, which is not only an incredibly fun arcade style high score game, but also one of the most convincing VR environments I have experienced. Number 88, Rain on Your Parade. While this game at first seems like a simple case of getting stuff wet and then later using other elements to interact with them, what makes this game so good is how it really twists that concept to make interesting scenarios, like a zombie apocalypse, petting a dog, a Metal Gear style stealth level, or even a level which is just a whole RPG. Number 87, XO1. This game's interesting concept of being able to increase or decrease your density to respectively fall faster or glide leads to a very intriguing, relaxing game about exploring desolate planets, each with their own quirks which add gameplay variety while still maintaining the satisfying core of its gameplay. Number 86, Immortality. This is an incredibly intriguing game where you look through the clips of 3 lost movies by fictional actress Marissa Marcel and try to work out the mystery of what exactly happened to her. And I love that they filmed everything live action and the performances are genuinely excellent, making for a very engaging experience. Number 85, Journey of the Broken Circle. I love a platformer that tells a story, and this one uses a circle trying to find his perfect missing piece to tell a really sincere story about the search for love which, I'll be honest, ended on a great note that I didn't think it would. Number 84, Power Wash Simulator. I enjoy power washing in real life, so a game centered around this concept was sure to draw me in, at least as a joke. But when I actually played it, the gameplay was not only solid, but also really emulates power washing well and is incredibly satisfying as a result. Number 83, Kuru Kuru Kururin. I was definitely aware of this game before it was added to Switch Online, but I didn't expect it to hook me that much, yet its quirky, unique action puzzle gameplay sucked me in and I fell in love with it. Number 82, Professor Layton and the Pandora's Box. This game provided one of the best cutscenes in the entire series, the sword fight between Layton and Anton, and that's actually what got me into fencing when I was at university, so that's cool. But other than that, it's also a solid, delightful Professor Layton adventure. Number 81, Spyro the Dragon. While I loved the original as a kid, it's the reignited trilogy version that got Spyro onto this list. Not just for reminding me how fun Spyro games are, but also because it's one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen, genuinely pushing CGI movie quality at that point. Number 80, Pokemon Moon. Yes, the game has its issues, but I can never fail to love the amazing story they set down for this one, and Lucamine is still my favourite character in this entire franchise, as well as one of my most wanted characters for Smash because that near Lego fusion form is so damn cool. Number 79, Snipperclips. This was not the only game I got when I got my Switch, but there's a reason that 1-2 Switch isn't here. And one of those reasons is that Snipperclips, with its engaging, unique concept, was all me and my family played for basically the first week of its launch. And when that's true, you know a game is good. Number 78, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. This was my first Smash game, and as a result, it was actually where I started to become a Nintendo fan rather than just someone who played Pokemon and Mario. But I also have to owe this game for making Lucario my favourite Pokemon, and for having such a fun mode as Subspace Emissary, which I poured hours into. Number 77, Pokemon Sword. It's funny that I was so anti-Dexit when that was announced, refusing to buy the game at first, because when I played it, I loved it thanks to the British vibes and great characters, but in reality it's Crown Tundra, an amazing DLC with so much to explore and do, which had me hooked for days, and that's what puts it this high on this list. Number 76, Shrek 2. Yes, I unironically have two versions of Shrek 2 on this list, and yes, part of this is because I used to watch a heck of a lot of Shrek 2 as a kid, so it spilled into my gaming too, but this is actually still a really solid adventure style game that I still really enjoy going back to even now. Number 75, Bayonetta 3. I'm one of the few people who wasn't super into Bayonetta 2, so I was surprised that Bayonetta 3 got me like it did. Partially because the story direction didn't bother me too much, but also the Demon Slave was such a fun mechanic to play with. Number 74, Daddish. I could talk about how the gameplay may be basic, but it's still solid despite that and makes for quite a fun platformer. But the reason I love this game is that at the end of each level, when you find one of Daddish's lost kids, you get a small interaction between them, and these are genuinely really funny, and are a great reward to look forward to at the end of each level. Number 73, Escape Academy. This is a really accurate adaptation of the idea of an escape room that still manages to play around with the concept in cool ways, and my mum and I spent 2 days blasting through it and were only left wanting more, which was great because there's DLC. Number 72, Chisel. Nitrome always had the most high quality Flash games around, games which felt like they had the quality of many modern indie games, but Chisel, a game where you drill through planets Super Mario Galaxy 2 style to make them smaller, is without a doubt the one that hooked me the most, both back then and now when I found ways to play it. Number 71, Picross DS. I play a lot of Picross games, but DS was my first and will probably remain my favourite thanks to larger puzzles than you'll find in, say, the Picross S games, and the little animations that act as your reward for completing the puzzles, as well as a stylus just straight up being the best way to play a Picross game. Number 70, Rayman Legends. Rayman Legends is oozing with creativity, with levels that take on entirely different structures at certain points, my highlight being the spy level, but the music levels are possibly the best part of the game, especially when they take a song and reimagine it completely in a different genre, such as the mariachi style Eye of the Tiger. Number 69, We Love Katamari Reroll plus Royal Reverie. Katamari's gameplay is a weirdly specific type of game that I've always been drawn to, basically picking up or swallowing increasingly larger things to increase your own size, and Katamari is among the best of this genre, with this game specifically taking it to an even larger scale, which is exactly what I wanted in it. Number 68, Temtem. The reason most modern Pokemon games are so low down on this list is because I played Temtem, a game which takes heavy inspiration from Pokemon but makes routes larger, does away with PP and instead has a stamina gauge, lets Temtem evolve during battle, and has some killer designs for its creatures, which all makes it, ironically, one of the best Pokemon experiences on the Switch. Number 67, Portal 2. I enjoyed Portal 1, but I don't think that GLaDOS got to shine as a villain until the sequel, and as this game is longer, has more varied environments, and also has Stephen Merchant in it, this game will always be the one I'm more fond of. Number 66, Dogs. I've talked about this game on my channel before, but the main points I made were that it's basically a game exclusively for kids, but it's still very well made and holds up well on returning to it. Plus, I'm honestly fascinated by Ivlet and just how dark a turn the game suddenly takes. Number 65, Stick Fight the Game. This game has a snake Gatling gun, and I think that alone deserves a spot on this list, but it also demonstrates that this game knows that local multiplayer games work best when they embrace pure chaos, and boy does Stick Fight do so in the most glorious fashion. Number 64, Thomas Was Alone. It truly is something special when a game can make me care this much about a bunch of quadrilaterals, but the narration here does so much of the heavy lifting in conveying a genuinely engaging story that I never get tired of revisiting. Number 63, New Pokemon Snap. The fact that the Snap games are essentially Pokemon taking on first-person shooter gameplay is itself amazing, but New Pokemon Snap is also a gorgeous game with so many different things to see, and that's exactly what makes it so engaging. Number 62, Florence. This is probably the shortest game on this list, and yet I adore it, as it tells a heartfelt, heartbreaking story about finding and losing love and discovering what is truly important in life that doesn't quite get me tearing up, but certainly gets me close. Number 61, Rivals of Aether. Rivals is a game very similar to Smash, sure, but one thing that distinguishes it for me is that every character has some sort of semi-permanent element to their moveset that stays on the stage or the opponent, and this makes setting up traps for your opponent so much fun in this game, which is why I always love to come back to it. Number 60, Kamiko. While not my first ever indie game, I credit Kamiko with truly starting my love of indie games, as despite its short length, it's a blast to play through, with tight gameplay and a really nice visual style that keeps me coming back every so often. Number 59, Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure. If you love Professor Layton games and also rhythm games, then hey, you're basically me. And while it doesn't have the emotional depth of a Layton game, Rhythm Thief does still emulate the style well enough to be engaging, and of course is a great rhythm game with great music. Number 58, Tori 2. This is a really short platformer that nonetheless manages to be incredibly fun, with a great soundtrack, great controls, awesome level themes, and some really lovely Christmas levels that have become a tradition for me to play on Christmas Eve now. Number 57, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Whenever an exploration game really hooks me, I describe myself as having been Breath of the Wilded, because this game was the first to do it, and as someone who was never really into Zelda, it's impressive that I've pumped as many hours into it as I have, but there's just so much to do in Hyrule, how could I not? Number 56, The Last Guardian. The Last Guardian is a game with a really heartfelt story, and a big cat, dog, bat, monster thing that ends up being the most adorable thing ever and definitely the heart of the game. But I also want to bring up the amazing VR demo of this game, which is still my favourite VR thing to get the uninitiated to try out. Number 55, Tekken Tag Tournament 2, Wii U Edition. After a nightmare I had as a kid where Yoshimitsu cut my mum's head off, I stopped playing Tekken for years until Tag Tournament 2 when I fell back in love with it, and ironically Yoshimitsu became my main, and the massive roster plus the fact that I played it a lot with my friends at uni are a large part of the reason I got into it again. Number 54, Sonic Mania Plus. Never been that into Sonic, much less 2D Sonic, but Mania somehow really got me, with its gameplay being genuinely enjoyable to me throughout the game, and its level themes being as creative as I would ever want, and as a result it isn't even up for discussion. This is my favourite Sonic game. Number 53, Animal Crossing New Leaf. We all know that Animal Crossing is a calm, delightful life sim, but it's the interactions with villagers that make New Leaf so memorable to me. Or rather, my interactions with Elvis the Lion, where I developed a deep hatred for him and sent him hate mail to try and get him to leave the village. Number 52, Scribblenauts Unlimited. The idea of being able to spawn any object you want is already an amazing concept, and I like how open-ended they leave this game's puzzles so you can really experiment, but being able to create your own objects is such an ingenious idea, and the wacky stuff it leads to is something I am so fond of. Number 51, Super Kiwi 64. This game's character looks adorable, but when you actually play the game, there's something that feels altogether more insidious about it. Might be all the fetuses lying around, but this game, while short in typically Ciactro fashion, feels incredibly good to play, and what a soundtrack as well. Number 50, Big Brain Academy for Wii. This, for me, is nostalgia incarnate, and every little sound, all the music, the format of all the games, it takes me back to a different time, and whenever I revisit it, as relatively rare as that is, I always have a wonderful time, even if it is basically a brain training game. Number 49, Rhythm Paradise. Rhythm Paradise has everything I would want in a rhythm game, from great music to simple gameplay to fun scenarios that are a delight to experience every time. And while I haven't played a significant amount of any other Rhythm Paradise game, I am incredibly fond of this one. Number 48, Day of the Tentacle Remastered. I love a good point and click game, and with its fun characters, especially Laverne, and its gimmick of letting you swap between 3 different time periods, this is a damn good point and click game. Number 47, Digimon Rumble Arena. Before I ever played Smash, Digimon Rumble Arena was my platform fighter of choice, and despite my disappointment at the lack of Greymon, I poured hours into this game, which uses Digivolution as a pretty cool gimmick to create something that, even as a very casual Digimon fan, I always adored. Number 46, Saints Row 2. I was never into games with cheat codes, but the amount of time I spent with evil cars, low gravity and invincibility turned on in Saints Row 2 is telling as to how fun those cheat codes were. But even as a regular game, it has a lot of fun missions and characters I actually got pretty invested in. Number 45, Ring Fit Adventure. As soon as I found out that Nintendo was making a game featuring a buff, bodybuilding dragon, I knew I'd love it. And when I actually played the game, I enjoyed it even more than I expected, because as much as it's making you exercise, it does it in an enjoyable way. Number 44, Metroid Prime Remastered. You may have noticed that, unless new Pokemon Snap counts, there haven't been any first-person shooters on this list, and that's because they rarely interest me, but with its gorgeous world, amazing atmosphere and layered exploration, Metroid Prime has well and truly hooked me. Number 43, Super Mario Bros. 35. Super Mario Bros. 35 truly is the greatest tragedy of our time, because as fantastically as Super Mario Bros. Translated into that Battle Royale gameplay and as addictive as it was, Nintendo axed it after not even a year, and I genuinely just await the time when they decide to give it another day in the sun. Number 42, Kato. Many of the games on this list are games I got to experience thanks to Xbox Game Pass, but none captured me as much as Kato, which has an ingenious gameplay gimmick involving rearranging a map to access new areas and a lovely, cozy vibe that made it a joy to play through. Number 41, Donut County. Imagine a Katamari game, but with a hole instead of a ball, and you get an idea for what Donut County is. But it has its own quirky sense of humour, characters, and art style, which I love enough to have completed the whole game more than once. Number 40, Lego City Undercover. With a great sense of humour and a world packed with references and homages to all sorts of media, this game is both a fantastic evolution of the Lego games that came before it, and almost like a prototype for the kind of thing that the Lego movie would end up being. Number 39, Grow Home. Grow Home is literally just a game about climbing, but something about that feels very fun, and every time I reach one of the stems that can be ridden to plug into the giant floating crystals, it always feels like a fun reward in itself. Number 38, Powder Game 2. This truly is a game from my childhood, and despite it just being a browser-based powder simulator, the variety of different elements you can play around with, and the fact that you can add playable characters into the game, makes this something that encompassed my whole thoughts as a kid, as I made my own concepts for elements and even little comics about the game. Number 37, Space Invaders Frenzy. I don't play a lot of arcade games, but whenever I have the chance to go to an arcade, I make a beeline for the Space Invaders Frenzy machine, because not only is it greatly satisfying and a lot of fun to play, especially with 2 players, I'm also really good at getting the high score. Number 36, The Simpsons Hit and Run. Hit and Run is a legendary game, and the reason is because while it isn't technically an open world game, it still has that cool Grand Theft Auto vibe, except with less actual murder, and more funny quips from The Simpsons, which I honestly never found annoying at all, even when they get repeated over and over. Number 35, Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction. Robot Wars was one of my favourite childhood shows, featuring robots that people made to battle against each other, and this game, while definitely lacking as a game, gave me as a kid a way to experience what it would be like to be a part of the show, and it was glorious, especially with Jonathan Pierce's iconic commentary being in full force on this game. Number 34, Super Mario Bros. I don't know what the first video game I ever played was, but my best guess is Super Mario Bros. And despite it showing clear signs of age, it saved the video game industry for a reason, and it's still a fun game that I can only imagine was insane to experience at the time. Number 33, Mario Kart Double Dash. Double Dash is one of the most unique Mario Kart games there is, and for that alone it deserves praise, but I personally find that the gameplay itself is really satisfying, especially drifting, and of course it has my beloved Chain Chomp as, in my opinion, the most fun item in the entire franchise. Number 32, Scribblenauts. Unlimited has a lot of advantages, but I'd be lying if I said that the original game being my first didn't make it special to me, and despite the more limited creativity, you can still basically spawn any object, and I do prefer the level structure of the old games as opposed to Unlimited. Number 31, Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. When I play multiplayer games, it's almost exclusively player versus player games, but Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, with its unique approach to working as a team to fly a spaceship, is the one cooperative game that I get a lot out of. Number 30, Bayonetta. Bayonetta hits you from its first cutscene with the style that it's going for, and what a style it is. A little bit risque, but still manages to be somewhat classy most of the time, and always a lot of fun, which seeps into the gameplay and makes this an overall extremely memorable experience, and has always been the highlight of the franchise to me. Number 29, ARMS. I'm in the minority here, but boxing was my favourite sport in Wii Sports, so ARMS taking that and making an actually good game out of it, and not just that, but an incredibly fun online game, is amazing in itself. But it also packs itself with excellently designed characters, and I hope against hope that the franchise has a future because there's so much potential for it. Number 28, Tales of Monkey Island. Monkey Island is and will always be the king of point-and-click adventures, and while most consider one of the first 3 games to be the best, the 3D models and stellar voice acting in Tales lend so much life to the characters, and the gameplay is basically everything you would ever want in a Monkey Island game, so for me, this is the one I've always been the most in love with. Number 27, Mario Kart Tour. I cannot believe that this game is this high up, as for years I wanted nothing to do with it. But even beyond the amazing amount of content it has, its high score based gameplay is so addictive that I've fallen for this game, and the awkward touch controls are the only thing that stops it from being even higher on this list. Number 26, Miitopia. I'm not a massive fan of RPGs, and Miitopia may not have been an exception to that if it wasn't for the fact that I could have a party consisting of Scarlet Witch, Maxwell Scribblenauts and Professor Layton, among others, and this ability to essentially create a massive fan fiction of your favourite characters, with shipping included, is what kept me hooked to Miitopia for a month straight. Number 25, Katamari Damacy Reroll. I know that few people consider Damacy to be the best in the series, but I've only played the Reroll games, and Damacy was my first experience of the franchise, so that game will always be special to me, and likely the one I'll keep coming back to over and over. Number 24, Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins. I find it genuinely stunning that a game for the original Game Boy ends up being the most creative 2D platformer we've ever had, with cool themes that make every level interesting and an open design that means you can tackle the worlds in any order, plus it has the rabbit suit and Wario, so what's there not to love? Number 23, Pokemon Y. Pokemon X and Y are without doubt the worst mainline Pokemon games we've had for many reasons. But it's among my favourites, not just for nostalgia or because it brought me back when I was starting to lose love for Pokemon, but also because a region with 450 Pokemon is quite simply amazing and gives so much variety for team building, which I greatly appreciate. Number 22, Professor Layton and the Curious Village. The Curious Village, I think, has by far the best setting of any Layton game, and the mystery of what's actually unfolding in the village is possibly the strongest mystery in the series too, which may just be my perception based on it setting the trend for the series, but how well this game is set up should never be underestimated. Number 21, Pokemon Diamond version. This was not my first, nor my second Pokemon game, it was my third. But it was also the first I played without sharing with my brothers, and I spent so much time with it, cementing Sinnoh firstly as my favourite region for so many reasons, but also even without Platinum's improvements, the Gen 4 games are among the best in the series. Number 20, Go Vacation. This seems like it should just be a Wii Sports clone, and to an extent it is, but the fact that it has 4 decent sized open areas to explore is not just a lot of fun, and what I spend most of my time doing with friends in the game, but it's so good, I wish Wii Sports would take a leaf out of its book. Number 19, Mario Kart Wii. I could spend my single sentence here talking about how this game has a certain quality about it that makes it super fun. But my love for it stems in massive part because the time of my life that it came to me was when my mum had cancer, and playing Mario Kart Wii as a family kept us together, so I really owe more to this game than most I've ever played. Number 18, Tori 3D. Ciactro has become one of my favourite indie developers, and Tori 3D is what started it, for many of the same reasons as I love Tori 2, but the Starry Sky level in particular really took me by surprise in a way that a cute game about a bird trying to get his ice cream back doesn't feel like it should, in a good way. Number 17, Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. It took me years from watching my first full playthrough of Doki Doki to actually fully play the game myself, but it was worth it to experience firsthand a surprisingly deep story that has more to it than the surface level shock value you initially think will be the main draw of the game when you first hear about it. Number 16, Wii Fit U. I have so many memories of the Wii Fit games, like doing table tilt with my family, spending ages cycling around Woohoo Island, getting told I'm obese, listening to the excellent Kung Fu Extra music that I can't find anywhere online. But Wii Fit U introduced some of the most fun games in the series, games that feel like games, to the point that I love playing them even when I don't have to exercise. Number 15, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Smash Ultimate was what really got me into the Nintendo communities I exist within now, and speculating about the roster was something I genuinely love, even with the toxicity. Plus it's a game I can play for hours and hours, and I have that game to thank for my most viewed video on YouTube, so all good stuff with Ultimate. Number 14, Super Mario Odyssey. I've always loved hats, especially top hats thanks to Professor Layton, so the idea of a game in my favourite series, Mario, which focuses very heavily on this very specific thing that I love and has characters and spaceships shaped like top hats, is wonderful. And even better that it's also an incredible 3D platformer with an amazing gimmick, tight controls and epic set pieces. Number 13, Astrobot Rescue Mission. When I heard about Astrobot, it was people saying that this was the Mario 64 of VR games, and this game lives up to that title by being itself an incredibly good 3D platformer, enhanced by allowing you to step into it with VR, but by no means relying on that to be good, and I love immersing myself in this adorable robot world. Number 12, Ratchet & Clank. Ratchet & Clank is a game from my childhood that I played so much, and I played it recently and realised that my love for it wasn't just because I was a kid. It's a genuinely excellent game, with a great pair of central characters and an awesome arsenal of weapons, my favourite being the Glove of Doom. Number 11, Nintendo Land. When I rank Nintendo Land here, it's actually entirely on the merit of Mario Chase, Luigi's Ghost Hunt and Animal Crossing Sweet Day. 3 absolutely phenomenal multiplayer games which entirely justify the gamepad for me and never get boring, especially Mario Chase. Number 10, Mario Kart Super Circuit. I'm probably the only person ever that would put Super Circuit in my top 10, but once you get past the tricky controls, which can actually be fun once you're used to them, you have one of the best looking Mario Kart games, with more creativity than almost any other Mario Kart, and hands down one of the most underrated Nintendo soundtracks of all time. Number 9, Professor Layton and the Lost Future. Let's not beat around the bush. The story is the main reason to play Professor Layton, and the Lost Future tops them all here, with massive, epic cutscenes, great characters, and an emotional core which culminates in a beautiful, heartbreaking ending that stands as the only video game that has ever made me cry. Number 8, Towerfall. This isn't the game Extremely OK Games are known for, but people overlook that with Towerfall, they've made, in my opinion, one of the greatest local multiplayer experiences ever, an incredibly intuitive, easy to pick up on game full of fun, satisfying gameplay, which is only made better when you start getting into mutators. Number 7. Pokemon Legends Arceus. Before, Pokemon was never going to get a game in the top 10 because its gameplay is never the most important part of these games, but Legends Arceus takes the central draw of the franchise, catching Pokemon, and makes it the focus in such a fun way that I could not help but fall in love with, and now it's without a doubt my favourite ever Pokemon game. Number 6. Super Paper Mario. People overlook how great the puzzle, platforming, RPG fusion gameplay of Super Paper Mario is, because I play a game like that even without a story. But let's be honest, the story that this game tells and the twists and structure breaks it has across it make for an unpredictable but amazing experience. Number 5. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This game is many years old now, yet it holds up so well as a Mario Kart game, but takes things so much further with its approach to DLC, both on the Wii U and the Switch, as well as how much content it really has, how good it looks, and of course, that killer soundtrack with its live band, which all make this the Mario Kart to beat from this point on. Number 4. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Gonna be real with you guys, I like 3D World, but Bowser's Fury is doing all the heavy lifting in this one, with such a unique concept that Mario has never tackled and done in such a fun and often tense way, with the only key issue being that it's so short and I wish there was a full game of this kind of thing. Number 3. Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2. Advance 2 was the first game I ever owned personally, and I mean, it's Super Mario World. This game is genuinely better as a 2D platformer than most 2D platformers, not just for its time. And honestly, the advanced version has so many cool things like voice acting and the opening cutscene that make it the definitive version for me. Number 2. Super Mario Galaxy. Galaxy is such a special game, combining the grandiose and epic with the quiet and atmospheric in beautifully perfect measure, having more variety than most entire series can manage, and a backstory for Rosalina that cements her as one of the most lovable characters in this franchise, and this as the best Mario game we have ever gotten. Number 1. Celeste. Yes, this game is probably the most expertly crafted 2D platformer ever created, more so than even any of Mario's offerings, but my love for it stems from the fact that it came to me at a time in my life when I found out that I had anxiety, but I didn't know what that meant. And this game helped me understand it, and come to accept it, and work on it, so I have so much to thank Celeste for. And there we go. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear not only if any of my favourite games are favourites of you as well, but also whether you'd recommend me any games based on what's on my list, as I'm always happy to find new games to play.